Shoddy Heat is the 4th episode of the 36th season of The Simpsons. This is directed by Gabriel DeFrancesco, and as always there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. It's an okay episode. I feel like the second half, maybe the final third, was definitely better than the first half. It took me a while to get into it, but once I did, I quite enjoyed it. And actually, the reason that I didn't love it is not what I would have expected, because we have a lot of flashbacks, and ordinarily I don't care for flashbacks. That's not exclusive to The Simpsons. That's pretty much any TV show, but I didn't mind the flashback scenes. It just took me a while to really care about the mystery. Starts off establishing that it's a very hot day, so the Simpsons go to the retirement centre because they're always complaining there that it's cold. And while they're there with Abe Simpson, with Grandpa Simpson, Wiggum comes in and says that they need Abe's help. They're actually digging up the graves in the cemetery, and they find this particular coffin where there were 2 bodies. And of course the mystery points to Abe, because there was a business card in the coffin that said Simpson and O'Donnell, and at the bottom of the card it said ask for Abe, basically confirming that the Simpson is Abe Simpson. And I was initially genuinely curious to find out who this was, why that business card is there. But then I'd say for a good half of the episode after that, it just wasn't that interesting. We get a flashback to younger Agnes Skinner, which was quite fun. We then are in the present day, and I will say we go back and forth at a pretty steady rate. I never felt like I was being pulled around too much, which is one of the reasons I don't often love flashbacks, is because there's just so much choppy editing often, but that didn't seem to be the case here. And back in present day, Grandpa Simpson is trying to escape on his motor scooter, and Wiggum refers to him as Humphrey Go-Kart, which I quite liked. And we learn that his partner, O'Donnell, Billy O'Donnell, just never came back one day, and Abe didn't go looking for him, apparently. So Lisa and Bart decide to team up after a brief vampire impersonation, which I quite liked. There were some good moments, but the narrative itself was very slow. But I did like Humphrey Go-Kart and the vampire interaction with Bart and Lisa. They team up and they go and speak with Patty and Selma, and Lisa then confronts Abe, and we get another flashback, and we find out Abe tells Lisa, and I quote, "It's something that would destroy your father," which I have to say is a little dramatic once we find out what it is as things go along. I don't necessarily think it would destroy him, but we'll come to that in a little bit. Abe then talks with Agnes Skinner. This is all in present day. And then he goes and talks with Burns, and then we get a flashback of Burns and Abe talking about Billy, and young Homer, who was supposed to be waiting in the car, comes into the room, and it was so beautifully animated, but I hated. He was eating the crayons and he opens his mouth, and I could have handled it with the puddle of crayon goo spilling out of his mouth, but it was when the crayon fell out of his nose. There was just something disgusting about it. It was so brief but so powerful, and genuinely made me feel sick. And Abe is still asking Burns, what have you done with Billy? But Burns tells him, forget about Billy, and I will give Homer a job and never fire him, no matter how badly he messes up. And then we have a montage of Homer screwing things up and never getting fired for it, which I kind of like. I like the fact that The Simpsons is very self-aware, particularly in recent seasons, and that's basically The Simpsons holding their hands up and going, look, we know Homer should not still be employed by the power plant. We know he's constantly leaving and quitting and causing chaos, but he still works there. Well, here is an explanation. So I kind of liked that part of it. And it turns out that Burns had actually paid O'Donnell off, and O'Donnell had moved to a private island, and we actually get a video call with the character to prove this. And it turns out that Agnes knew that Burns hadn't killed Billy, but she wanted Abe to believe that, so Abe would then kill Burns. Honestly, I feel like Agnes's role in this was not that interesting. I did quite like the flashbacks with younger Agnes, but her role as a character, I didn't really care for. And then we get a sweet moment between Homer and Abe, and then at the very end, Lisa asks Wiggum, well, who was the body? And I feel like this is honestly a little bit lazy I feel like it's a little bit stupid and I don't buy into it. I don't love it. But basically, it was the printer, the business card printer, who wanted to be buried in the same coffin as his wife, and there were a bunch of other business cards in the coffin. So it wasn't just Abe's business card, there were other ones there. So it's a bit of a coincidence, I guess, for them to have only found Abe's, and then that led us to tell this story. But it just felt like a bit of a cop-out. It felt like we had this dramatic beginning where Abe Simpson was clearly connected to this second body in a coffin, but in actual fact, it was just a bit of a red herring. And I don't know, it just feels a bit lazy, and I didn't really love it. I would have preferred it if they'd just found another way. I don't know if they were just looking into a missing person cold case, but then if nobody reported Billy, why would they? I don't know. I just feel like they should have found a way where it wasn't just this pointless bit of information. I didn't like it, but I guess it's not enough to affect my somewhat enjoyment of the episode. I didn't really care for the story itself for most of the episode, but I guess towards the end, as we started to get answers, I guess I was a little bit interested. I feel there's a lot of fluff in this. I feel like there are parts of the narrative that just don't need to be there, or I don't believe them within the context of the story. But all of that being said, I guess I came away from Shoddy Heat feeling relatively satisfied, not so much with the story itself, but more so with little moments. Humphrey Go-Kart, the vampire discussion, and just various other... Homer, the crayons, that image is going to be burned in my brain for a very long time, and the self-awareness of Homer never being fired despite causing a lot of problems at the power plant. So, overarching narrative, it was okay. But lots of little things here and there I quite liked, and I guess by the end of it, I'd say I felt reasonably satisfied with Shoddy Heat.